So I am Nikita Banks, and I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I am also the vice president of NASW New York State, and I work in private practice in my hometown of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn.
How did you first go into social work?
So I first went into social work via my own therapist. So I was struggling with mental health issues, depression mainly, dysthymia, not knowing exactly what that was, just kind of going through a general unhappiness and dealing with my own emotional issues. And I got to the point where I had done all of the things that I've known to do. And then I decided that I would get professional help. And that came with me asking my doctor for a referral to a therapist. And then um, after going to see my therapist for a while, I was like, hey, I like this and I feel better. And not a lot of people who look like me do this. So I feel like I could probably do what you do. Which
Yeah.
is it feels so arrogant to say now. It's like I think I can do what you do. Doesn't feel that hard. But um what he told me was, okay, well, rather than going the psychology route, which is the only thing that I had known about how to go into private practice and be a therapist, he was like, you can go the social work route. And so that was what I chose to do.
What skills do you find yourself using the most in your current position?
The social work skills?
Yeah.
Um, I can't really say. I feel like what I like about social work the most is that we are not just somebody that does diagnosing and treatment. Like we can actually connect people to services.
Mm.
And so I feel like I do more of a hybrid model most of the time. Like, when you have clients who are, which are Black and Hispanic, some of them are low income, some of them are dealing with poverty issues, just kind of being able to connect them to a concrete resource is very valuable for them, because it's hard to be like, okay, I know that you're hungry, but let's talk about your feelings about hunger. Like it just kind of doesn't make any sense if you can't do what you need to do to at least assist them in connecting them with the services. So I feel like just that hybrid model for me is what I probably do the most.
Like you said, you can't focus on like a therapeutic process if somebody is homeless or um, hungry or doesn't have childcare and they can't come in. That just it shows the extent of what you can do as a social worker.
Yeah, and I even spoke to, like, when I first started, I spoke to my own therapist about, I had a client. I was just tired that day, and there was so much going on in my office. And he came in and was like, a few weeks I had seen him, and he kept complaining about not having a job. And I was like, I'm gonna either fall asleep in session to be transparent, or like I was like, let's just do your resume. Let's do your
Yeah.
resume and like focus on this. And I felt so guilty about it, like, oh my God, I did his resume. Like, we talked about his feelings and stuff too, but I was like, I set up his email. I wrote his resume. We wrote the cover letter, and then the next week he came in and he was like, I got like 3 interviews, and I think I'm gonna get a job. And then we could actually like tackle his emotional stuff then.
Mhm.
And so it wasn't until like I spoke to my own therapist, it's kind of about my guilt of like, we just did his resume. And he was like, Nikki, sometimes that's what you have to do in
Mm.
order to get to the feeling stuff. And
Right.
so it's something that now I'm proud of. But I was just like, listen, we can't keep talking about his feelings when, like, he needs a job. Like, that's a real thing.
Hmm. Yeah, a major stressor going on if you're unemployed, for sure.
Yeah.
Could you discuss one case or situation that really shows how important social work is?
One case or situation. I can't. I feel like they're all important. Like, I can't think of just one. I mean, outside of that one, right?
Mm.
Just being able to like connect him with the resources that I was able to connect him with. Um, No, I feel like I've always kind of been a social worker if you think of the aspects of it, just the advocacy and like um fighting for other people. So I don't look at my cases as in one requires a social work solution as opposed to other. I feel like most people when they come to me, um, they all require that.
Yeah.
So
Could you talk about some of the challenges that you face as a social worker?
um, I think for me, the challenges that I faced was not having a community at first. I remember going to NYU and thinking of how I was going to get my hours to be to get an LCSW, which is what I wanted when I initially started school. And then one of the people that I was on my internship with, her mother was an LCSW and her dad was a like a psychologist.
Mhm.
And so I was like, gosh, getting your hours is not going to be a thing because you've already got like two people in your family who can kind of like write off on your hours or that you can kind of, they can supervise you, right? So just kind of being able to tap into a network um, was challenging for me. I worked in an organization when I was trying to get my hours. Um, One of my supervisors decided that she wasn't going to give me my hours after a point. She told me that um she didn't think that I was ready for private practice, which according to the state I had earned over 3,000 hours and we had done over 100 supervision hours. And if you felt like I wasn't ready to be in private practice, then that's something that we probably should have addressed earlier in supervision than you being ready to sign off on the hours that I earned. But what I was able to do was again tap into my community network of like Black social workers and coworkers that I had worked with who were really a resource for me. And they were like, okay, well maybe she's not going to give you what you need, but you come here and get what you need. And it took a little bit more time, but um, they were very nurturing to my journey. And I felt like I don't want to blame racism for the situation, but I think that sometimes consciously and unconsciously, just kind of having that bias and being that barrier to other people advancing in their careers can be a challenge when you don't have a network of like people who look like you and value what you do and what you bring to the table. So that was very challenging for me, but I thank God that I did have like my network of like brown social workers who were able to bring me along.
Yeah, absolutely. And even when you said earlier, like, oh, not many people look like me who do this, I was going to ask you if that is still a challenge that you currently have, finding that network.
No, no. But I also want to create that network. Like
Yeah.
even so I ended up working with an agency. The supervisors there gave me my hours when I got there. It was right in my hometown of Bed-Stuy, which was amazing for me. The neighborhood had changed. I had gotten priced out and actually had to sue a bunch of people in order to get an apartment in my own neighborhood.
Wow.
Um, and so what ended up happening was just kind of being there and seeing that everybody in my building were Black and brown social workers that were, in the community, of the community, and servicing the community. Um, I was like, gosh, I want to be a resource like this for others. And then when I did get my hours, one of the partners there took me out to dinner and he was like, you got your hours. What are you going to do now? And I was like, I kind of want to practice. And he was like, pick an office. And so allowing me to build my business in that way, allowing me or for them being a resource to me to be in the neighborhood where I hoped to work, but didn't think that I would be able to build my practice. It was gratifying, and that's something that I would love to be able to do for other members of my community. But I
Yeah.
do think a lot of therapists who are Black and Hispanic are now being a lot more vocal and not being a lot more visible, so clients know that they can connect with somebody who's definitely culturally competent.
Yeah, absolutely. That plays a huge part. Could you talk about some of the rewards that you've had as a social worker?
The rewards. Um, just simple things. Like I had a client recently, um, and randomly she was just like, "I'm so proud of you," and I was like, "What are you proud of? What are you proud of me for?" And she was just like, just, when I came to you, I didn't think that it was possible that I would open up to you. She, somebody who grew up in foster care. She's had bad experiences with social workers in
Mhm.
the past, maybe not social workers with the capital LCSW, but that lowercase SW. Um, and so I think that she just didn't know that she would be able to trust me and open up to me and rely on me and work with me. And she was like, "Gosh, I've gotten to the point that I really feel like I can open up to somebody, and it's because of you." And I was like, "Well, you show up every week, you do the work. Um, I'm just here with you." And I try to let my clients know, like, you own the house. I'm the real estate agent. Maybe I can tell you what we could show to sell it, but you own the house. And so I never want you to feel like I own the house. I'm coming in and I'm going to run your spot and tell you what you need to do, because I'm not the authority on anybody else's story. Um, I'm just sometimes the narrator.
Mm.
And, being able to kind of like bridge that gap for not just clients who look like me, because I see clients everywhere, but clients who specifically have had challenges with other clinicians where they didn't feel heard or they didn't feel seen or they didn't feel understood, is very important for me.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. It's the simple pleasures. What advice would you give yourself when you first went into the field and graduated?
Um, Not all social workers are social working. And what I mean by that is that there are a lot of social work spaces that I'm in that are not nice. They are not nice places. They're not filled with nice people.
Mm.
Um, there are some social work environments that were all about like feelings and like putting the client first. And then there are some places that I've been in and it just kind of felt like, I was upselling these mental health services so that we could keep the lights on or that we could do the business stuff of it. And it has to be a balance of both. Just kind of learning the business aspect of it, but putting client services first is what I want to do and what I want to focus on. So, I mean, I think that that's probably an aspect that I would tell myself. But for new social workers coming out, I would I would advise them to think of the end goal. There are not enough of us that are going for that LCSW. I'd rather have it and not need it than need it and not have it. And my own therapist, like he joked with me, like that C stands for cash. um, because once I got it, even when COVID hit, I was able to like pivot in my business, and the end of 2020, I've actually hit all of my income goals and all of my metrics, and that was not something that I was doing previously, but it's something that I'm able to do now, and just focus on self-care,
Mm.
um, and boundaries.
Yeah, that's a huge one for sure. If you could tell people who are not in the social work profession anything about social work, what would it be?
We don't just take people's children, and we don't all work for welfare. um, I don't know what people know about social work or like what we're seen as, and you know, we're not all poor.
Mm.
That's another thing. I think that a lot of people just kind of have a bad connotation or a negative connotation of what they think social workers are or what we do. And there's so much more to it than that. I personally didn't know that we can diagnose and that we treat, and that I could work in the government. There are social workers who are in Senate and Congress, and you know there's so much more to it than what we do. And um it's a very what's the word that I'm looking for, versatile career to be into. Like you can really pivot and try and do other things. And it's something, a skill that you have that you can transfer to any other area that you work in.
Yeah.
But financial social work is is a niche in our field. There's so like I heard someone is doing like veterinary social work, vet tech social work. Like there's library social work. You know, there's social workers that work in in most fields.
Yeah.
Um, you know how Oprah loves a social worker, right? Her husband, I mean, not he's not husband, but you know, her partner's a social worker. Susie Orman's a social worker.
Mhm.
So like there are a lot of social workers that are trained to be social work, trained in social work that we don't know them for doing, but it's something and a transferable skill that you can use anywhere. To me, it's like communications. If you have a communications degree, you're probably going to use it anywhere. If you have a social work degree, you're going to use it anywhere.
Mhm. Yeah, I like that a lot. My final question for you is, if you could reform anything about the social work field, what would it be?
Um, I don't think we get the respect that we deserve. I think that there's, you know, no shade to psychology or not taking anything away from it. I feel like psychology, in a way, is a dying field. We have um, educational system in America that just kind of doesn't reward you for being in school longer and being trained longer, you know, for financial reasons. And you know, people are trying to get out and get to work quicker with less debt,
Yeah.
right? So the field of social work is growing rapidly, and in terms of like insurance reimbursement rates and how we are treated in the workplace and how we are paid in hospitals and all of these other settings, like it has to stop. Also, a lot of us are, you know, we're women, we are women of color, and because of that, we're not paid equitably. So the pay has to, like, that has to change. The insurance stuff and the systems stuff has to change, and just kind of budgetary limitations for us.
Yeah, I agree, and I think a lot of people shy away from the profession just because of the connotation that social work doesn't pay enough, and it's 6 years of schooling, and you're doing two unpaid internships, and just like the whole system of academia is just, yeah, exactly what you're saying.
And then when you graduate, they're expecting you to not make any money. And then you know, when I was looking for my hours, I went on a message board and I was like, hey, I'm trying to get my hours, and I have my LMSW, I have my master's, I'm somebody's mother, I got bills. And I was told by someone in private practice who looked like me that I should volunteer for her in her private practice. And I was like, I can't afford to volunteer for you in order to get my hours for 36 months.
Oh my lord.
No, I can't do it. So just even that piece of it. And I hate that some of us are not pulling each other along. Doesn't matter your race, doesn't matter your ethnicity. You know, my therapist, he's a white guy, but he's a white guy from the projects in Brooklyn, New York, which is kind of crazy. It made him culturally competent. He understood my stories. I could say whatever I wanted to, but he's kind of like a rarity, right? The person that gave me my start was a white social worker who's my mentor to this day. So me just being able to pull other people along in the profession and guide them in a healthy way, and fight for those people coming up after under you. The income stuff it's not good. It's not good.
Yeah.
And we have to stop being on the lips of politicians and everybody else after something happens, right? Like we're mental health is so reactive in this country. And so if you want us to go with the police officers to help, you know, on these calls, maybe speak to us and see what we want to do and pay us equitably if we're going to be doing this kind of dangerous work. If you want us to be on the front line of the opioid crisis, I don't know, maybe listen to us when we have an opinion about how funding is spent, and like what you guys can do to like mitigate some of those things before it gets to that point.
Right.
I mean, It's almost sometimes like treading water in the ocean with a bucket.
Yeah.
Nobody called social
Yep.
workers names at all. Like we don't get the respect that we deserve. But every time something happens or something breaks in this country, we're the ones that they call, and it's not fair.
Hmm. Right. Yeah. I mean, and we're in the same place as medical professionals, same place as all these other professionals who have a huge pay increase compared to us, which is,
Yeah, but we're women and we are not respected.
yeah.
And and even when men enter into the programs, or even when white men enter into the programs, they get a boost up. They get to be our boss
Hmm.
with not that much experience sometimes. So I mean, it's a lot that has to change systematically within social work, but it starts with us.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you for that. That was good.
And
Good.
social workers need social workers. We advocate for everybody but us.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think that's why like this campaign is really cool because I feel like sometimes social workers can't find like their own voice to like advocate for themselves because they do so much. Social work is such a broad field, so it's like, well, what do we do?
Even this is a great idea.
Yeah.
Not enough of us know what social work is. And I've been screaming like we kind of have to get a message and we have to be our own messenger in this. So thank you for the opportunity.